Hello, my name is Justin Jones-Fosu, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy, and I'm joined today by Justin Jones-Fosu. He is the author of several books, and his latest book, as we're recording this, is I Respectfully Disagree: How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. We talk about who's the GOAT, whether it's LeBron or Jordan. We talk about nuance. We talk about curiosity. We talk about other things that can help facilitate difficult conversations in a world that's very divided. And I'm really excited to have Justin on the show today. He is the embodiment of energy. You'll hear that throughout our conversation. And that's just not on the conversation, but also at home as a dedicated father to two spirited children, but also atop the world's highest peaks, having recently conquered one of the famed 7 summits. But his passion for elevation doesn't end with trekking. It's mirrored in his professional ascent as a captivating business speaker, innovative social entrepreneur, and insightful workplace researcher, and he brings it in this conversation today. He is at the helm of Work Meaningful and the driving force and CEO behind a movement that empowers organizations across the globe, delivering over 50 keynote addresses a year on the pivotal topics of meaningful work and inclusion. His mission, well, it's to ignite a transformation in corporate culture, guiding organizations and individuals to ascend to their peak potential through mastery of mindset, purpose, and performance. He also has a flair for infusing humor into his well-researched content, and you'll find that as we proceed through the conversation today. Let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Justin Jones-Fosu, and a productive one at that. Enjoy. Justin, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. The first, if you're listening to this live, like as it dropped, the first episode of the calendar year of 2025. And I couldn't think of a more interesting way to start off the new podcasting year for me in terms of the calendar year by saying that I am not a fan of New Year's resolutions. I don't believe in them. They're that, okay. So you won't be able to do what I want. I wanted you to respectfully disagree.
No, I'm not a fan either.
There we go. Justin is the author of I Respectfully Disagree: How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. This would not have been, well, it depends. Some people are really hung up on New Year's resolutions. I'm glad why aren't you a fan of them? Just out of curiosity.
For me, I'm a researcher, and a majority of the research points to people giving up on New Year's resolutions by February, latest March. And so I've challenged people, this is actually something we do, is I challenge people to do something that's more significant and meaningful to them. Our company's called Work Meaningful, and it's people's birthdays. So I challenge people on their birthdays. Those are the times they should reevaluate, reassess, challenge themselves with birthday challenges, identify thing I do now is 43. Well, 43, I'm 43 years old. And so I started when I was 40. And so it's like 43 things I want to do by my next birthday. And I put it in the 3 categories of people, professional, and personal. And so then I have a list and I enjoy it. But it's designed around my birthday. So I tell people to do it around your birthday.
Yeah, for me, that will shift. I think it'll shift that way for me once my kids are officially like out of school and stuff. But I typically start my year in September because that's when the kids have gone to school here. Although my daughter's off in college now, my son's in high school. So I bet in 4 years it'll shift back to like good old July. Like that's when it'll start for me. So,
I love that.
I just, as we're recording this, came back from Los Angeles from the Second Brain Summit by Tiago Forte and his team there. And one of the things I did on the way back was, other than, I started to go through your book and, because, what better time to read than when you're traveling? It's a great way to kind of pass the time. And also, I'm pulling double duty. But I spent some time in the American Airlines lounge. And when you're in a lounge, you got that, and we're watching college football. It was a Saturday. And there's another gentleman from the Carolinas. And we talked about how, in the United States, particularly, like it's just such a thing. Like college football is a thing. In Canada, collegiate sports, not as big a deal. No one's really necessarily going around so what their alma mater is and so on and so forth.
Right.
But then through that conversation, we started to have a conversation about the differences between Canada and the US. And one of the things that invariably is going to pop up is political conversations, right? And again, you're kind of approaching it from where you are. And what I found was, and I'm very, very careful about these kind of conversations, is civility, like to keep things civil. And it was a really great conversation because we both walked away with it. And I would say we didn't completely agree on everything. You know, he was in his 60s. Right. I'm in my early 50s. I'm Canadian. He's American from, again, every part of each part of the world has different, distinctions. And so that's what makes us human, right? And what makes up society. But neither of us walked away angry, upset, ticked off. It was a respectful conversation. And, when I saw, again, coming back to your book, the idea of respectful disagreement to me, it's an art form that we're losing. And what do you hope to do with the book in that regard? Because I think that there is lots of room for this to, hold space for people in the world.
Yeah. So for me, this is, as you mentioned, it's not just about the elections. This is not just about what happens January 6th. This is not just about the big things. This is even about, you didn't mention the biggest disagreement of all, and that's who's the GOAT. LeBron or Michael Jordan. Anyway, but
fair. There was a whole. I'm gonna link to the clip. Wasn't that crazy clip where there's like everyone got so up in arms? I'm like, guys, it's clearly Jordan. Like,
but the interesting thing is, my goal, my heartbeat is to improve relationships so that people are having many more respectful disagreement. People won't be perfect, right? I'm very clear on this. While I was writing I Respectfully Disagree on my writing retreat, I disrespectfully disagreed with someone. So I tell people this is not a thing about perfection. This is a thing about how do I continue to have better, more productive, healthier disagreements? And when I miss the mark, how do I apologize quicker and get back on base in my relationships? And so that's what it's about. It's having more of those, not only at work, having more of those in our communities, but even more of those at home.
And, as I was, part one kind of talks about the divides. Part two gets into the pillars. And one of the things that as I was kind of, again, skimming through and getting through some of the meat of the book, was I couldn't help but think about nuance, right? This idea of nuance. And another clip I'll put out there from Rich Roll, the Rich Roll podcast. Actually, I'll link to the whole episode, is when he talked to Terry Crews, who also, he was an athlete, and now, everyone knows who he is if you've seen movies and white chicks. Yep, exactly. You can't see what Justin's. I had the pleasure of meeting Terry. I was on, by the way, if you really want to know, I don't think I've ever shared this. If you pause White Chicks at a very specific time during the auction, you can see me in the background because I was an extra on that set. They filmed it here in Victoria. Honestly, this is my former life, when I was doing that kind of stuff, it was one of the best sets to ever be on. The Keenan Ivory Wayans kept it chill. Terry Crews had just really started to be in terms of his acting career. I was on set for that. It was such a joy to meet him and meet some of the other guys. But he talks about in this episode with Rich Roll, the idea of nuance and how we've lost it. I'm going to touch on one of the elements that you bring up as one of the pillars, but I'd like you to touch on the role of nuance in respectful disagreement, because I think it's an area that, while we probably touch on it a decent amount of times, and I'm hearing it more and more, I don't think you can hear about it enough.
Yeah, for us, the nuance comes in with our pillar 4, which is seek the gray. And in a world that wants to be very black and white, everybody wants to make it black and white, but it's actually gray. If you even look at my book, you'll see between the black and white is a very thin line of gray that you have to intentionally look for, because that's what it is. And why this is important, I remember during my MBA, I had one of those cool professors who was like the Dead Poets Society, the late Robin Williams, like, and he would have you sit in the middle of the room for 10 minutes and write a 10-page paper about it. I was like, is this an MBA class? What are we doing? But he had us read one of the most profound books that I've read. And it was a book called Dialogue, The Art of Thinking Together. And the concept of this book is that most people come in with A, and then you have another group that's B. And so I'm trying to convince you, Mike, of A, and you're trying to convince me of B. And now we even bring in other people. Like, I need Susie and Jeff, I need you to be allies. And then you're trying to bring in your people. Now we're having this communication war. versus asking, well, how do we create C together? And C's often not 50-50. C might be 95-5. C might be 60-40, right? And it comes to a place for me, even terminology. I don't like using terms like middle ground because middle ground implies 50-50. I like common ground. So how do we find common ground, right? We'll give you a great example. If we're talking about gun rights or gun control as an example, instead of starting off conversations with, I think you're stupid. Why would you do that? That's dumb. What if we started with, wow, one of the things I really appreciate about both of us is that we really care about the safety of our families. That's a starting point where you find that common ground and you identify the nuance in the conversations that allow you to then catapult there to have those types of conversations where you can now describe and hear a person's perspective. But our world, we're becoming so just the concrete nature of I have to be right. And part of that is because we've been, even Carol Dweck talked about this, we've been conditioned to have this fixed-based mindset, right? Where I have to be better than you. Like as long as I know more than you, I'm good, right? And that's what we're doing in our black and white world versus what if instead of winning, right, winning a conversation, the real winning was learning something new, whether about the person or about something that they share.
That's great. And I mean, I think emotions run hot. Attention, I think, not tension per se, but this, I remember, and again, this is tied so much to productivity and productiveness, is this idea of attention. I believe productivity is intention and attention, that link, right? Like I intend to do this. How am I going to pay attention to it? But we live in a world that is just, there's an assault on that attention. What role does that assault play on disagreements?
Yeah, so it's huge. I'll just take one aspect of it, our listening capability. I've been really diving deeper into this concept of how do we have deep listening in a distracted world. And one of the things that we often find is that people are often in this place of what we call double Dutch style of communication, right? And if you don't know what double Dutch is, like a single rope is one rope and double Dutch are two ropes coming together and somebody waiting to jump in, like take a breath. And this is why I disagree with you, right? And then jumping up. And that's how we often listen to each other, right? Whether we disagree or not. Because what we've done is in the social media world and the thing, I want you to see me as very interesting. So our challenge to people is let's first foundationally seek to be more interested rather than interesting. The second piece of that is we give people a powerful tool we call the power of three. And in the power of three, it challenges this double Dutch style of communication. So we can have a conversation like, Mike, how's your day today? You're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm like, my day's fine too, Mike. That's power of one. Power of two is like, hey, Mike, how's your day today? Oh, it's fine. What made your day fine? Oh, I heard this interesting bald head speaker. I remember that bald head speaker. That's power of two. But if I take it a step, how's your day? Fine. What made it fine? I heard this interesting bald head speaker. What made him interesting? Now I've gotten to the third level of the conversation. And why that is important is because oftentimes we are even disagreeing about totally different things.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I've loved when people tell me that they don't like diversity and inclusion. I love it because my first response back is, I appreciate you sharing it. How do you define it? Because as they share how they define it, I can share, and as I dive in deeper, how I define it. And diversity and inclusion is all of us. It includes every single person, right? And I know they value themselves normally. And so as we dive into those conversations, that's one of the things I think that's hurting us is that because we're not meaningfully present with people, because we're waiting to jump in, is that we're not actually hearing what people are saying and we're not actually hearing what people are meaning. And it allows us to dive in deep with deep listening.
It's improv has helped me with that, improvisational comedy, because you have to listen. Like you can't block. There's rules, right? I don't know if you obviously have studied this. You've probably looked at the role of improv, and is that something that maybe people should explore when they want to kind of improve this kind of ability to have conversations where it's not that double Dutch style that you're talking about?
100%. It's funny that you say that because Jean Zhao, Stanford professor, she came up with this conversation tool called Thank You Because, and she modeled it after improv. And thank you because could be something in our pillar 5 about agree to respect. You know what, Mike, thank you because you mentioned something and you shared it in a way that I've never heard before. Or, Mike, thank you because there's 3 things that you said and number 2 really stood out to me. Or simply thank you because, Mike, wow, this is a tough conversation for us to have, but I really appreciate you leaning in. Now, what I didn't do is not once did I just say I fully agreed with you or even partially agreed with you. and this is sometimes the challenge we have as we engage in disagreements, is that we feel that full acknowledgement is full agreement. And they're two totally different things. And one of the things that we talk about with respectful disagreement is that you can leave each person feeling fully acknowledged, even if you don't disagree with them. I mean, even if you don't agree with them.
Right.
And so that's one thing. So that improv, I think, not only helps you because you listen deeper, but there's actually been, thank you, because it's modeled off of improv.
Well, thank you, because bringing that up reminded me of Patton Oswalt's tweet about, the idea that, and it got such an uproar, where he said, I don't have to respect your opinion. I just have to acknowledge it. And people got really bent out of shape. So they're confused about the difference between being like respect and acknowledgement, because you don't necessarily, those things are not mutually inclusive. They're different things.
Yeah. So here's the nuance, right?
There we go.
So I'm gonna find the gray. I had to uncover in the book, and actually our chapter 2 is why I respectfully disagree with Aretha Franklin.
I saw that. I was going to get to that too. Like, hold up.
Because she says, how much respect do we need? Just a little bit. And we don't need just a little bit. We need a lot of it. And what we had to first do in our book is we had to really understand, one, how does society normally define respect? And so what I can see is people interpreting respect in their own lens. And we called it the 10 characteristics of golden respect. We took what societal respect was and how we repositioned it. And just give you 3 quick ones. One is that you must earn respect. And we start challenging it, like, why? Why can't you choose to freely give respect? Because everyone is worthy of value and dignity and respect. Number 2, that respect means that society says that respect is that I hold somebody in high esteem or high regard. And we've challenged that. And it's like, no, respect is not about high esteem and high regard. And that's why we've often conflated respect with honor. And so you can hear somebody say, I lost respect for you. But no. You lost the position of honor for them. You may have lost the position where you've held them in high regard. But if respect is a choice, it's not something that they can lose. It's something that you choose to freely give. And last but not least is a person's title grants them respect. And we're like, no, a person's humanity grants them respect. And so I can see why people would be in an uproar, because if they think that respect means, do you see validity in what I'm saying, that they would be in an uproar. And somebody says, hey, my opinion is that all bald head men are horrible people. And I'm like, wait a minute here, brother.
Mm-hmm.
But if we engage into what real respect is, it's a choice. It's what we can freely give. So that's how I can see the nuance.
As you're talking about this, I couldn't help think about a couple things. Number one, the role of humor in conversation and what that can do in terms of either fostering agreement or fostering respectful disagreement. What, did you do a lot of looking into that and the role of humor in that regard? Or is it just something that, like, is there a diffusing element there that maybe, or even just a kind of levels the playing field a little bit, maybe disarms people like humor tends to do?
It can, but it can also backfire depending on who you're talking to. Because if somebody sees this as a very serious topic and you try to infuse humor in it and it hits wrong, there's like, oh, you don't take this topic seriously? And now you try to do humor and you've engaged.
Can I give you an example, a really quick example, which I only shared to my wife and she looked at me like, ooh. So and I think it's funny. Again, I come from a comedy background too. I've done improv, sketch, stand-up, all that stuff. And I've been watching a lot of stand-up lately, Nate Bargatze in particular. And we just got, our kitchen just got repaired. And of course, when you get kitchen repairs now, what's the most common appliance color now that's sold? Stainless steel is typically what people get.
Chrome, yeah.
Yes, chrome, stainless steel. Well, our kitchen used to have only white appliances. So our fridge we replaced a couple years ago. It was a white fridge. Now it's stainless steel. Our dishwasher, it was stainless. It was white. Now it's stainless steel. So half our kitchen is like our microwave and our oven are white appliances, and our dishwasher and our fridge are stainless steel. I'm like, wow, look, our kitchen is getting more diverse. And she's like, whoa, what? Like I'm like, well, I think it's actually kind of funny. And she's like, yeah, but so that would be an example, right? Where it's like, are you taking that issue seriously? I'm like, of course I take it seriously, but I also found the humor in that and thought, so I guess it's also depending on who it's coming from too, because of, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and you need some black countertops because,
we do have we have black countertops. We do. We do, but they're not. They're like speckled black. So there's like a whole spectrum there.
The biracial countertops.
Yeah.
A lot, man. But no. But the interesting, it's like, yes, I mean, that's why relational capital is so huge, right? It's trust. And my last book, Inclusive Mindset, we talk a lot about intent and impact. And so sometimes we go into humor with a great intent, but the impact may hit different based upon the person that's receiving it, right? So no matter what your intent was, the impact may hit. And we can't ignore impact, but we also have to acknowledge intent. And so where humor plays a part for me is in the body of research called conversational receptiveness. And they talk about these 4 recipes that are helpful and that they've actually researched to show people having conversations and want to continue to have conversations with people, even that they vehemently disagree with. And one of those was hedging your claims. And so hedging your claims is simply, if I was like, not hedging your claims is, Mike, I think, why would no one believes that, Mike? That's not hedging my claim. But if I said, hey, Mike, from my perspective, one of the things that I've seen is, that's hedging your claims. And so where humor can fall in place is in hedging your claim, because it softens the approach. And that's a way that a person can receive it. But again, it has to be based upon relational capital. Is this person always serious? Do they joke around? Do they think you're being sarcastic? And especially, can we have a conversation? Because humor is horrible online, because I can't understand tone. I can't understand if you're joking, the sarcasm in your voice. And oftentimes we try to infuse humor and we think emojis will solve it all. And then people receive it in a whole different way.
Yeah, especially because emojis are a whole language of them. I mean, my kids, you have kids. I mean, I remember like you can't use certain emojis anymore because they mean something completely different. But we used to be able to use them. Like, no, you can't use that anymore. I'm like, well, what am I supposed? So I can get the whole. So I just pass messages to my kids in cursive, and then we have the same kind of conversation at this point. I want to dive into the pillars, because you've touched on one, which is the one that, the idea of the seek the gray, which I really wanted to get into, and you touched on, because Anthony Bourdain, I remember watching the documentary Roadrunner, and the filmmaker said that Bourdain really loved to run into the gray. And I've thought about that again and again and again. So let's dive into the 5 pillars, and we can list them. But I think that when I approach a book like this and a conversation like this, I kind of want to find out which one kind of lets the other dominoes fall that much simpler. Is you know what I mean? Of the pillars.
Number one, pillar number 1. And it's funny because initially we had 4 pillars, but as we dug deep into the research, we added 1, and it's actually the first one. And it's challenge your perspective. And most conflict resolution books or other things, they focus on when you're in the conflict, what to do, breathe, 10 times, pinch your ears, all the kind of stuff, which can be very helpful for emotional regulation. But for us, we realized that for a heart-based approach to respectful disagreement, it has to start before any disagreement even occurs. So challenge your perspective is not about being in the disagreement. Challenge your perspective is an intentionality to hear perspectives that diverge from your own, right? And one of the statements we often make is that we can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and yet still passionately pursue their humanity. And we can do that before a disagreement occurs. And so how do you do that? So if we're talking to leaders, one thing that we challenge them to do is to ditch the open door policy. Most of them have created open door policies behind closed doors. And it's been very interesting is that we even have virtual open doors. I'll be on Microsoft Teams from 3 to 5 on Tuesday through Thursday, right? And we've been challenging them to do what we call an out the door policy. And out the door is where you intentionally go out to hear the stories of your people and engage. In open door is passivity. If you need me, I'm here. And well, how do you do that? I'm glad you asked that question, Mike. Well, we give a formula called 1 MC over W, which stands for 1 meaningful connection per week. What if you built into your calendar 15 to 20 minutes to intentionally have conversations with your neighbors, coworkers, or other people, family members that may have divergent views, and just ask them about them, seek to be more interested than interesting. And if that's too much, so that's 52.14 times in a leap year, well, then flip the W upside down and make it 1 meaningful connection per month. And maybe it's a little longer, maybe it's a lunch. But until we start going into places of challenging our perspective, it halts us from really fully engaging the other 4. Last one practical thing is my mom planted this in me. Like when I was growing up, my mom would have us go to events that we disagreed with. I'd be sitting there like, Mom, why are we here? We don't even agree with this. But what she was doing is she was planting these seeds of humanity, that even in a place of disagreement, there are people that are human.
Right.
And so now I created this thing called Circles of Grace Challenge. And the Circles of Grace Challenge is simply every 6 to 12 months, I go to events, experiences, or I engage with people in either which I don't know a lot about and or I disagree with. Those allow us to work the muscle that we've heard things that diverge from our normal circles or our normal bubble before. So when we're in disagreement, it's much easier to exercise emotional regulation when we have these conversations.
This circles right into no pun intended. The pillar 3, cultivating your curiosity. Because as soon as I saw that, I was thinking Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental, all that stuff. And again, the way that scene played out beautifully on Ted Lasso, the dart scene is a great example of like, you said, like, I don't know enough about you. And yet I come in with this statement and, and the subtle thing that people miss in that scene, I think, and I loved is when he uses his left, he goes, oh, I forgot I was left-handed. Like that just sets the tone when he accidentally, and I'm like, okay, so this guy is more than, and even the antagonist, like, uh-oh, like, but not fully uh-oh, just like, okay, so there's some gamesmanship going on here. So curiosity, like for those that are, because we've heard, again, much like nuance, a lot about curiosity and cultivating that. How do you make time for that when people are constantly saying that they're bombarded by so many other external and internal forces that kind of just conspire them to do instead of be?
So one, and I love that you brought that up, is that we can't be curious about everything and everybody all the time. And that's why, for me, those two places around one meaningful connection per week or one meaningful connection per month are very significant, because it gives us an opportunity to lean into curiosity in ways that are strategic and not overwhelming.
Right.
And so, number one, I would really lean into those frameworks. Number two, we have to know how our brains work. Right. And the interesting is I studied the brain and how our brains operate in a space. I call it taking the exit on people. Right. And that was my TEDx. And I realized I studied the brain. It's like, Monday through Friday, you take this exit, and then one day you're supposed to go straight. But what do? You take the exit. Why? Because your brain wants to conserve energy for things it thinks it doesn't know. And so you've gotten second and third hand information from social media, other places, and you've categorized it for future use. And what ends up happening is right before we get to know somebody, we end up taking the exit on them based upon how our brains have categorized that information. And so for many people, I'm like, this is not an intentional thing. It's actually unintentional how you operate in your brain. It requires intentionality to drive forward towards some really amazing humans. And so that's one of the things when we think about cultivating curiosity, it's not just simple like, oh, just be curious. No, we have to challenge that taking the exit to go dive in deeper and say, oh, what do you mean by that? Or challenging the definition. Somebody's like, I'm a Christian. Now you've just identified, here's 5 things that I already believe about them just because they said they're a Christian.
Right.
But you have no idea what denomination they belong to or what they believe or how to think. And so that's one aspect of cultivating your curiosity, is by asking some really awesome questions, by approaching people from what we call a beginner's mind, and by engaging, even if you don't know what to say, tell me more, are the power of 3 words that invite people to continue going so that you are able to grasp deeper understanding.
So how does someone infuse the elements of what you shared in the book, the 5 pillars, and again, the divides themselves, in a again, and I'll circle back into a world that is kind of trying to eliminate nuance, trying to create more judgment over curiosity. And not only that, but just bombarding us with like just a never ending to-do list. Because I mean, the initial argument that people, I would imagine, would have in a general sense is, I don't have time to focus on this. How is there's got to be a subconscious way to focus on it and infuse it so that there's less friction with adopting these kind of practices.
I'm actually okay with friction.
Okay. No,
and the reason I'm okay with friction is because of this thing. We've tried to make in our society everything really easy.
Yeah.
Right. And we've tried to say, well, how do we reduce the friction? When we rode bikes, we fell. Right. When we learn new things, and when I went mountain biking for the first time, I fell off a bridge. But like there are things we have created, and this has been part of the subset of society I've been pushing back against. In this strength-based world, and I love strengths and operating in people's strengths, we have confused weaknesses for things that we're not good at yet. And Carol Dweck really calls us out in some really meaningful ways about how we just, I'm not good at that, so I'm not going to even focus on that. And so we look at failure as not another data point of learning, but as something that's final. And so for me, I'm very honest with people it's you have to know your why. And if your why is strong enough, you'll lean into practicing it. Like even the power of three initially might feel clunky to people if you're not used to asking questions and you're used to jumping in. But the more and more you practice it, myself and other people we've talked to, the more and more natural it becomes. So when people say this to me, I'm like, oh, you're practicing the power of three. I'm like, I didn't realize I was doing that. It because it became more natural. And that's the aspect of practice. But our why has to be significant enough to know how to get there. And that's the tortoise approach, right? I love the fable tortoise and the hare, but we have so many hares in our society that want to make it easy and jump out there and boom, and it looks good initially, but there's no long lasting sustainable growth. And so we're after teaching people the tortoise.
Yeah, we talk about consistency, but not sustainability.
I love that, Mike.
So,
Justin, how do you, can I ask that question of you?
Yeah.
How do you define the difference between consistency and sustainability?
Well, I think sustainability are things that we can maintain and sustain over an extended period of time, and consistency can be applied to sustainability. So the old, like we've heard of, don't break the chain, right? You know, you have doing it every day. Well, not everything has to be done every day, right? You know, I mean, but if you do it once a week, that's sustaining it. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it drives me nuts when, and that's the tortoise and the hare approach, right? Like the hare is just like boom, 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 boom. The tortoise, like, you know, and again, it shows you that fable is great because the hare just goes, okay, I'm done. I'm burnt out. I'm going to lean against this tree and sleep. And the tortoise is like, look, I'm just moving along. It's why we're sitting at almost 600 episodes of this podcast as a, you know, week over week, as opposed to every day. And I know lots of people who do daily podcasts, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's their focus. Right. I'm also a writer, a speaker, a coach. I'm not just a podcaster, but what you can do, and I think this is an interesting point, and to your point about adding layers and adding things in, is now we do twice a week. One is a flashback episode, which is a low friction kind of, and then we have the main episode. So I'm still able to do things consistently, and now I can just sustain a little bit more. And so that's the part. I think people, to your point about friction, is number one, they don't recognize it's stuff that they're already doing in some way, shape, or form, and you're just identifying and getting clearer about it. That's number one. But I think the other thing is that bit by bit is how we grow. Bit by bit is how things happen. And you're right. Without friction, there's no growth. You have to experience friction to even know what you want flow to be. Kotler talks about like the idea of flow and the flow state. You also can't stay there. I mean, we're talking about AI a lot lately, and AI, I think, as much as people are like, oh my God, it's dangerous, it's all that. Yes, there are elements, but like anything, you need to use it judiciously. But as somebody who's getting older, which by the way, we all are, wouldn't it be great if we could, wouldn't it be great, which is the whole idea behind what AI, even in science fiction is, it would be able to sustain things that we as humans can't, because we are living, breathing, we've got blood, we get older, you know, we can't do as much. So I'm going to get AI to help me with the quantity portion, and then I'll apply the quality. If you can do that in a way that makes sense, then you can focus on the kind of stuff we're talking about, because AI can't do that for us. It can aid us to a degree, but it can't do it. And that's, so to me, there's lots of things, but people are afraid of the front end work. They just want to go. Like the stepping back doesn't act as progress, but it's part of the process. And, you know, that's why when I said that joke out loud to my wife about our increasingly diverse kitchen, I shared it to my wife, saw her reflection back, and then said, you know what, this probably won't go over so well on Twitter or X or whatever. So I won't post it.
Definitely
not. And truth be told, when I talk about journaling, I say this to people all the time. You know, the benefits of journaling, I go, but one of the benefits you might not think about is if people wrote in their journals what they put on social media, maybe social media might be a better place to spend your time. Might just be. So, Justin, this has been a fantastic conversation. I want to be respectful of your time and our listeners' time. Where can people pick up the book, and where can people keep up the work that you and your company are doing?
Yeah, so they can pick up the book all over Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all these places. And they can keep up with us at howtorespectfullydisagree.com. We're coming out with our respectful disagreement quiz so you can figure out where you are on the continuum and have some pointed things. So we're really excited about that. And our overall company is workmeaningful.com. And so you can see the work that we're doing at the intersection of meaningful work and inclusion there.
Justin, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
I loved having a productive conversation with you.
Thanks to Justin for joining me on the show today. You can find everything that we discussed at mikevardy.com/podcast 577. And of course, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're getting your podcast right now, you just click on the links there, any of the helpful links we discussed. Speaking of where you get your podcasts, that's one way to support the show. Subscribe, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, even YouTube, subscribe to the show. That way we get your support and we can use that as fuel to make the show even better. Another way to support the show, of course, is to check out our sponsors, the ones that you heard during the conversation today. Go to mikevardy.com/podcast sponsors to check them out. Click on any of the links that resonate with you, and that way they know that we sent you. Speaking of sending you, I'm sending you on your way. That's it for this episode. I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation. Looking forward to seeing you the next time. And until then, remember, stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.